I did the DNA test as a birthday gift to myself. That is not quite accurate. My daughter bought it for me. She wrapped the kit in birthday paper and put it in a bag with tissue and handed it to me at my birthday dinner in October and said, "I thought it would be fun. You always talk about wanting to know where we came from. Now we'll know." She is 24. She has the specific enthusiasm of a young person who has found a solution to a problem the older person in her life has mentioned often, and who has not yet had the experience of solutions creating larger problems than the ones they solve. I loved her for thinking of it. I opened it at the table with the candle still lit, and I thought, this will be interesting. I mailed the kit in November. The results came back on a Tuesday in January. I was alone in the house. My husband Kenneth was at work. My daughter Simone was in her apartment across town. It was an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. I had come home from my shift at the hospital. I am a nurse. I had been on since 6 in the morning, and I was tired in the specific way of tired that is also a kind of relief. The tiredness of someone who has done what needed doing and can now sit down. I had coffee. I opened my laptop. I had a notification that my results were ready. I clicked. Before I tell you the rest, subscribe, because every story on this channel is real, it is raw, and it will stay with you. And drop a comment right now. Where in the world are you watching from? I read every single one. Now let me tell you what the results said. The results showed my ethnicity breakdown, the specific percentages of African, European, and other ancestry that the algorithm produces. This part was what I had expected. Confirmations of what I had always believed about our family's origins, a geographic picture of where the people who made me came from. I looked at it and felt the particular satisfaction of a thing confirmed. Then I looked at the DNA matches. The DNA matches section shows you biological relatives who have also taken the test, people who share genetic material with you, organized by how much you share and what relationship that implies. First cousins, second cousins, more distant relations. The algorithm sorts them and labels them and tells you what it thinks you are to each other. I looked at the matches for a long time. My sister was there. We have always known we are sisters. We grew up together. We share a bedroom in childhood. She is one of my closest people. Her match to me was correct. Close family, consistent with a sibling. My brother was there. Same. Correct. 3 cousins I recognized. Correct. I looked at the DNA match for my father. My father has also done the test. His grandchildren, who are enthusiastic about this kind of thing, had convinced him to do it 2 years earlier. His results are linked to mine on the platform. I could see his match. The platform categorized him as close family, consistent with a half-sibling, grandparent, aunt, or uncle. Not father, not parent. Close family, half-sibling range. I read it 3 times. I am a nurse. I know how DNA works. It is not a subject I need explained to me. I understood immediately what the category meant. A father shares approximately 50% of your DNA. The match the platform was showing for the man I had called my father for 51 years was approximately 25%. That is a grandfather, or a half-sibling, or an aunt or uncle. It is not a father. I sat at my kitchen table with my coffee going cold, and I thought about 51 years. My name is Diane. I am 51 years old. I grew up in southwest Atlanta in a house on a street that has since been demolished and rebuilt twice, in a family of 4 children. My older sister Renee, my older brother Marcus, myself, and my younger sister Patricia. My parents were Eloise and Arthur Simmons. My father Arthur was a postal worker for 30 years. My mother Eloise was a school administrator. They were married for 53 years before my mother died. She passed 4 years ago, peacefully, in her sleep. which is the kind of death that sounds like a gift even when it is not. I want to tell you about my father because he is the center of this story, even though he did not produce the DNA result that is its starting point. Arthur Simmons is 78 years old. He has the specific quality of a man who was shaped by work and by the particular dignity of that work. 30 years with the Postal Service, not glamorous, not celebrated, the daily work of a man who shows up. He showed up for 30 years to the root, and he showed up for 53 years to my mother, and he has shown up every Sunday to the phone call with each of his 4 children in the rotating schedule he established when we all left home, and that is not varied in 30 years. Sunday is his. We all know it. Sunday morning is the garden, and Sunday afternoon is the calls. He starts with Renee because she wakes up earliest. He ends with Patricia because she stays up latest. I am in the middle, Sunday at 2, which has been my time slot for 30 years and which I have rearranged my life around as needed, because his call at 2 is not something I negotiate. It is simply something that happens, like weather, like seasons, like the way certain things in your life are not choices so much as facts. He called me the Sunday 2 days after the results. I answered as I always do. We talked for 40 minutes about ordinary things: Simone, Kenneth's back, which had been bothering him, a neighbor on Cascade Road who had put up a fence Arthur found objectionable. He asked if I was eating well, which he always asks, which I have stopped finding either patronizing or unnecessary. I said yes. He said good. I sat after the call, and I thought about the 40 minutes and the 30 years of Sunday calls, and I thought, he doesn't know I know. He's been calling me every Sunday for 30 years, and he doesn't know that on Tuesday I saw a result that said what it said. I thought, this is what it feels like to be on the other side of a secret. My father is 78 years old. He lives in the house on Cascade Road that he and my mother bought in 1978, the one they raised us in after we moved from the demolished street, the house where we have all returned for every Christmas and Thanksgiving and Easter since we were old enough to have places to return from. He calls me every Sunday. He has called me every Sunday my entire adult life. When I was in nursing school, and when I was newly married, and when Simone was a baby, and when Kenneth had his health scare 2 years ago, and when my mother died, and through every ordinary Sunday between. Every Sunday. Without fail. The platform said, close family, consistent with half-sibling range. I called my sister Renee. She answered on the second ring. I said, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. She said, okay. I said, I got my DNA results today. The match for Daddy. The platform is saying he's not my biological father. It's showing about 25% shared DNA. I need to know if you know anything about this. There was a silence. It was not the silence of someone who is surprised. I know Renee. I have known her my entire life. I know the sound of her silences, the surprised ones, the thinking ones, the ones that are covering something. This was the last kind. I said, Renee. She said, I don't know everything. I only know what Mama told me. I said, when did she tell you? She said, 3 years ago, before she got sick. She said she needed to tell someone, and she chose me because she thought I could hold it. She made me promise not to say anything unless you found out yourself. I said, I found out myself. She said, I know. I've been sitting here thinking about this call for 3 years. I said, tell me what she told you. Renee told me. The short version. There was a man before my father, before Arthur. My mother, who was 22 in 1972, had a relationship with someone who was not Arthur Simmons, and that relationship produced a pregnancy, and the pregnancy was me. She had not known she was pregnant when the relationship ended. She was already with Arthur by the time she understood what was happening. She told him the truth. He chose to stay. He chose to raise me as his own. He never told me. She never told me. They had held it together for 51 years. I sat with the phone in my hand for a long time after Renee finished. Then I said, "Does Marcus know?" She said, "No, just me." I said, "Patricia?" She said, "No." I said, "Why you?" She was quiet for a moment. She said I was the one who could hold it without it changing how I treated Daddy. She said she was worried that if she told the others, something would shift, that they'd look at him differently. I said, "And she thought I would?" She said, "I don't know what she thought, Diane. She loved you. She was trying to protect something." I said, "She was protecting herself." Renee was quiet. I said, "She was protecting herself from having the conversation." Renee said, "Maybe. Probably. She was also protecting Daddy." I said, "Daddy knew." She said, "Yes." I said, "So she was protecting a secret both of them were already keeping." She said, "Yes." I sat with that. I said, "I need some time." She said, "Take it." I said, "Don't tell anyone I called you." She said, "I won't." I sat at the kitchen table until Kenneth came home at 6. He came in and looked at my face and said, "What happened?" I told him, all of it. The birthday gift, the results, the 25%, Renee's phone call, what my mother had told her. He sat across from me and he listened without saying anything until I had finished. Then he said, "What do you need?" I said, "I need to know who he is, the biological father." He said, "Do you want to find him?" I said, "I want to know if he's alive. I want to know who he was to her. I don't know yet what I want beyond that." He said, "Okay, whenever you're ready." I said, "I need to talk to Daddy." Kenneth looked at me. He said, "Are you sure?" I said, "He's been my father for 51 years. He deserves a conversation more than he deserves to have me walking around knowing and saying nothing." I drove to Cascade Road the following Saturday. My father was in the garden when I arrived. He gardens on Saturday mornings, always has. Tomatoes in the summer, collard greens through the fall, flowers my mother had planted that he tends now, in the specific way of a man who maintains what the person he loved built. Not because he has a strong feeling about flowers, but because she did. He was in his garden hat, the old one, the one that has been in that garden so long it is as much a part of the yard as the plants. He saw me come around the house and he smiled the way he smiles when one of us appears unexpectedly, surprised and pleased, the particular warmth of a man who likes his children and likes to see them. He said, "Diane, what brings you out here on a Saturday?" I said, "I need to talk to you. Can we sit down?" He read my face the way fathers do. The smile became something more careful. He said, "Let me wash my hands." We sat at the kitchen table, his kitchen, the one I grew up in, the one that still has the same yellow curtains my mother chose in 1984. He made coffee without asking. He always makes coffee when there is something to talk about. He put the cup in front of me with the handle turned to the right, because that is how I take it, a detail he has known for 40 years without ever having to think about it. I said, I did the DNA test Simone gave me for my birthday. He was quiet. I said, I got the results Tuesday. The platform shows you as close family, half-sibling range. It's not showing you as my biological father. He looked at his coffee cup. He is 78 years old, and his face is the face of a man who has lived every year of those 78, who has carried things and worked and loved and held things that were not easy to hold. He looked at his coffee cup, and he was quiet for a long time. Then he said, I was wondering when this would happen. The tests. I knew they'd come eventually. I said, You knew? He said, Your mother knew. We talked about it a few years ago. She was worried. I told her we'd deal with it when we had to. I said, Daddy, look at me. He looked at me. I said, You are my father. I am not saying you're not my father. I am saying I need to hear this from you. He said, What do you need to hear? I said, I need to hear what happened, and I need to hear that you chose me. I need to hear you say it. He set down his coffee cup. He folded his hands on the table the way he does when he is about to say something that has been inside him for a long time and is finally being released. He said, I chose you before you were born. When your mother told me what had happened, I chose you then. I chose her, and I chose whatever came with her, and you came with her. That's the whole story. I said, You never told me. He said, No. I said, Why? He was quiet again. He looked out the yellow curtains at the garden. He said, Because you were mine. I didn't see the point in making you feel like you weren't. You were Diane Simmons since the day you were born, and you were my daughter since the day you were born. And telling you would have just confused something that wasn't complicated to me. I said, It wasn't complicated to you? He said, No, you were my daughter, period, the end. I said, Did you love her less when she told you? Was there a moment when you thought about leaving? He looked at me for a long time. He said, I thought about it for about an hour. I was 25 years old, and someone had just told me something I had not expected, and I sat in my car for an hour. I said, And then? He said, And then I went back inside. Because I looked at what I had with her, and I looked at what leaving would cost me, and there was no version of the math that said go. I said, You were 25. He said, I was. People can be wise at 25 if they have to be. I looked at my father across the kitchen table, with the yellow curtains and the garden outside, and the coffee he had made without asking. I said, Okay. He said, Okay? I said, Okay. I believe you. He said, Good, because it's true. I said, I'm still going to try to find out about the other person. He said, That's your right. That's got nothing to do with this. I said, It doesn't change this. He said, I know it doesn't. He reached across the table and put his hand over mine. The specific weight of it, the roughness of a hand that has worked for 78 years. The hand that held mine at the hospital when I was 7 and had my tonsils out, that walked me down the aisle when I married Kenneth, that I have seen at every table of my life. He held it for a moment. He said, You're my daughter. You have been since before you were born. That doesn't change because of something a computer told you. I said, I know, Daddy. We drank coffee. We talked about other things, the garden, Simone, a repair he was making to the back fence, the Sunday call last week when I'd been tired and he'd said, You sound tired. Get some sleep. I love you. Ordinary things. The ordinary things of a father and a daughter on a Saturday morning in the kitchen with the yellow curtains. I have not yet found the biological father. I have a name from Renee, what my mother told her, which was partial, but enough to begin looking. He would be in his late 70s now. He may be alive. He may not be. I have a call scheduled with a genealogist next week. I want to tell you something about what the searching feels like, because it is not what I expected it to feel like. I thought it would feel urgent. I thought finding out would produce a kind of hunger, the need to know immediately, to fill the gap with information as quickly as possible. What I actually feel is something more like caution, a slowness, the sense that I am approaching something large and that the approach matters as much as the arrival. I am a nurse. I work in an intensive care unit. I spend my professional life in the space between what is and what might be, in this specific territory of people who are at the edge of something and whose families are trying to understand what the edge means and what comes after it. I have sat with families while they were told things they did not know were coming. I have watched people receive information that changed everything about the shape of their lives and have understood that the receiving of information is its own act, that it requires something from you, a decision about what to do with what you have been given. I know what DNA is. I know what shared percentage means. I know the difference between a first-degree relative match and a second-degree one. I have sat in hospital rooms and listened to genetic counselors explain these things to families, and I have understood every word, and I have helped translate for families who did not understand. I knew exactly what the platform was telling me when it categorized Arthur Simmons as half-sibling range. What I did not know was what to do with knowing. In the ICU, we have a phrase: the information is not the crisis. The crisis is the crisis. The information is just information. It is what you do next that matters. I have said this to families. I have believed it. I sat at my kitchen table on a Tuesday afternoon and I tried to apply it to myself. The information. Arthur Simmons is not my biological father. The crisis. I did not know yet what the crisis was. That was its own kind of difficulty. I sat with the not knowing for 3 days before I called Renee. I received information on a Tuesday in January, and I am still deciding what to do with it. What I have decided so far: Arthur Simmons is my father. The biology does not determine this. The 51 years of Sunday calls and birthday dinners and the specific way he said, across the kitchen table with the yellow curtains, "You were mine before you were born." That determines it. Biology is one kind of truth. Choosing is another kind. I am clear on which kind I was given. What I have not yet decided: what I want from the name in the partial information Renee gave me. Whether knowing more will give me something I need or something I will simply have to carry. Whether the man, if he is alive, has any knowledge of my existence. Whether I want to know. I have not told Marcus or Patricia. I have thought about this many times. I have landed, for now, on the same place my mother landed. Not because I think secrecy is always right, but because I need to understand what I have before I decide what to give to others. When I know more, I will decide more. I called Simone last week. I did not tell her what I had found. She is 24, and she bought me a birthday present, and I am not ready to tell her that the birthday present changed everything. But I called her the way I call her, on a Tuesday afternoon, and I told her I was glad she had given me the kit, that it had been interesting. She said, "Did you find out cool stuff about where we're from?" I said, "Yes, a lot of interesting things." She said, "I knew you'd like it." I said, "I did." She sounded pleased. She went on to talk about something happening in her apartment building, a neighbor situation, the kind of Tuesday afternoon thing that makes up the texture of a life. I listened. I asked the right questions. I was present in the way that mothers learn to be present, fully in the conversation, also holding something separate, the two states not incompatible. When we hung up, I sat in the kitchen for a while. I thought about Simone at 24, who bought me a birthday present with tissue paper and a bow and said, "I thought it would be fun." I thought about my mother at 22, in 1972, in a situation she had no roadmap for. I have spent a great deal of time thinking about my mother at 22. I have spent my life knowing her as a woman of considerable competence and dignity, as an administrator, as a mother, as the person who managed our household with a precision that I only understood as an adult, and that I have tried, imperfectly, to replicate in my own life. I have never thought of her as a 22-year-old who was frightened and alone, and made a choice she then carried for 53 years. I think about her now, and I feel something I had not expected to feel, which is a kind of tenderness. Not forgiveness. I do not think what she did required forgiveness. She was young, and she was doing what people do when they are young and frightened and do not know what else to do. Tenderness. For the 22-year-old who told the man she loved the truth and trusted him to stay, who built a life with him and raised 4 children in a house with yellow curtains and kept one room in the house that was nobody else's. He stayed. That is the thing I keep coming back to. Not the secret, not the DNA, not the man whose name I am still learning. The staying. The Sunday calls, the yellow curtains and the coffee made without asking, and the garden on Saturday mornings tended in memory of a woman he loved for 53 years. He is my father. That is the story I am keeping.